Okay, time for my review of the Honor 5C, and I hope I get the intro right. I already reviewed the Huawei P9 Lite, which I called the best sub $300 phone that is a slightly watered down P9. Now the Honor 5C is a slightly watered down Huawei P9 Lite and could maybe be the best sub $200 phone, and I think they are so close to each other that it makes it worth it comparing them throughout the whole review, and that's why this review will kind of be a review but also comparison to the P9 Lite to save me the time, and I would actually compare them with each other anyway. So I would say let's start off with the design and build quality. The first difference that we have is a little bit of a slightly different design, because where the P9 Lite was still flat, we have a minimal curve here, and I think that one actually makes a difference. The device overall is also very curvy, very round, and really nice to hold in the hand, and I would even say I like this backing material a little bit better, because this is brushed aluminum look plastic, but it is pretty much the most grippy back that I've felt in a long time. Therefore though, the sides, which are actually out of aluminum, so metal, are one of the most slippery ones that I've ever used. So they had a little bit of an odd combination of a really grippy back and a little bit of a slippery side, but overall it feels so amazingly round and great, and in some way even better than the P9 Lite. It is a little bit bigger than the P9 Lite is, about 1mm wider, also taller, and almost a millimeter thicker. And the P9 Lite already was bigger than the P9, so it gets bigger and bulkier every time, but this still feels so close to the P9 and actually in some ways better, but enough of that. Here we have the camera, here we have the flash, a microphone, headphone jack. Here we have the SD card and SIM card tray. On the bottom we have here the speaker. This is for the microphone and to be symmetrical, and the micro USB along with two screws that don't really have any point here. The power button I still think is placed absolutely great. It doesn't feel quite as good as on, for example, the P9, but it still feels great. Also the volume rocker greatly placed, all great rounded curves. There is still, like on the P9, this slight little edge, and what I have to mention here is it came pre-applied with a screen protector. I took that off just to see how it would compare, because I don't see any oleophobic coating, same as it was already on the P9 Lite. So I asked Honor and they told me it's of course not Gorilla Glass, but it's aluminum silicate glass. So it is scratch resistant, but definitely not on the level of a Gorilla Glass or something like that. So just keep that in mind. I would actually recommend to leave the screen protector on, because it didn't really make a difference and it will protect the screen. Same goes for the P9 Lite as well. There is also a notification LED. Here we have the earpiece, and we have a little bit of a bigger bezels than I would wish for, but for this price I really couldn't ask for anything else. So in overall it absolutely does a great job and no real complaints here. As for the display, it is, I would say, the pretty much identical display of the P9 Lite, because this is also very bright. The white point is pretty much perfect. You can adjust it in the settings. The blacks as well still are a little bit prone to IPS glow, as you can maybe see here. It's definitely a little bit more than the average amount of IPS glow, but that is still fine because the rest is great. We have an amazing color calibration. Couldn't be happier with that. It feels very natural, definitely not oversaturated, but also not washed out. Maximum brightness was top, and overall the qualities are absolutely great, and that's why I would say it is the same. Of course I would need a direct comparison to be sure, but I didn't see any real differences in normal use, and that's why I would say I would like to get to the sound. Okay, this would actually be one of the bigger differences compared to the P9 Lite, because the speaker is nowhere near as loud as on the P9, but it sounds still very good. The balance is okay. We have a little bit of bass, there are still mids, and the highs are quite clear. So the overall balance is pretty much the same. It doesn't have quite the high quality sound. And of course, when I say high quality, it is still a phone speaker, but it doesn't quite reach the P9 level, which also was the same as on the P9 Lite, I would say. So sound overall still good on the speaker, but not quite there where it was on the P9 Lite. Headphone jack quality is pretty much the same, though I would say a solid average, good enough for a really good earphone. For headphones, just about good enough, I would say. Okay, in terms of performance, and this is actually the second difference where I noticed some even though we have the same SoC, it doesn't feel quite as lag or stutter free, for example. Here the browser, everything is still great. Browsing experience is on par because super smooth and absolutely great. But once we enter apps, for example, like Phoenix or also Palabra later, you will see there is a little bit more noticeable lag. It's definitely not bad and it still performs great for this price range, absolutely top. But that is where I just noticed a little bit more of a difference. And those apps haven't been preloaded, so you will also see kind of how quickly they launch. But here throughout the whole system, I just noticed a little bit more. Okay, this is a Palabra issue. It always needs to cache. Let's try something else. Yeah, that's of course always the show-off effect. Let's switch. I hate Palabra for that. Okay, as you can see here, there is just a little bit more lag here and there. It stutters just a little bit more. The P9 Lite felt so much more lag-free or stutter-free. And overall, it's still a very, very nice, smooth experience. Don't get me wrong, because as you can see here, this is still nice. But I can't really narrow it down why it feels just a little bit more laggy. And if it would have been on the same level, I would have definitely said this is the best sub $200 phone. But the odd thing is I don't get it. They could maybe fix this just with a software update because the SoC and everything else is the same. And what I also have to mention is this is the 2GB version. I reviewed the P9 Lite with the 3GB version and there is a noticeable difference in terms of multitasking. Apps just closed a lot earlier. I couldn't maybe have more than 5, sometimes 6 apps in the RAM and then they already got killed. Where I could have a quite noticeable amount more on the P9 Lite. And for everyone asking, P9 Lite 2GB or 3GB version, I tried to get the 2GB version, but it's simply not available here, so I can't answer that. I don't think it will be the same, because the 2GB here on the Honor definitely seemed worse than a 2GB version should have felt. But that's the caveat. A little bit more lag and a little bit less RAM management. And the same goes actually also for the gaming performance, because games for some reason also ran with noticeably less frames. They were still overall smooth and it was playable. Not that many slowdowns, but just in general, less frames. Heating was no issue. It got warm to slightly above 40 degrees after over half an hour of playing, but it didn't seem to make any impact because the gameplay already wasn't that smooth. And the camera test also passed. It didn't really reach any concerning temperatures, so all good here. About the battery now. A charging time for it for some reason was actually quicker than on the P9 Lite because it ended at about 3 hours, where the P9 Lite needed 3.5. So maybe there was something wrong, because for some reason Huawei devices or recently just don't like my charger so much, and I used the stock one here, so I got about 3 hours, which is not great, and a few people actually have a problem with 3.5 on the P9 Lite, so just keep that in mind. The battery life though was for some reason actually slightly better than on the P9 Lite. I'm not quite sure why, but it's not a big difference, maybe 20 minutes, half an hour of battery, but of course my use is always changed. But what I would say is you can got close to 5 hours on data, slightly above 5 hours in mixed use, and easily break 6 hours on Wi-Fi only, so that is a highly respectable value. I used the brightness of 35% because the screen was already quite bright, didn't really have any issues. And once we talk about the software, there is not much to tell because you could just check my P9 Lite review. It's pretty much the same as well because I'm using the Android N theme. Just Google Android N and EMUI and you will find it. As you can see, it makes the device look a lot more like stock. I definitely prefer this look. We still have the nice quick set or the recent tasks here. The shortcuts of course are customizable if you get here to edit. And there is not really that much to add here. Most of the options are in the advanced settings. For example, also the battery manager, where you can see the power plan was to performance. So not that you think therefore the performance was weaker. So that's it. Software is solid, it's legit. Since Marshmallow, I don't have any problem with EMUI. About the camera, I would say it's pretty much the same as it is on the P9 Lite because I didn't really see any noticeable difference. Selfies still very sharp, very detailed. Skin tone seemed sometimes still a little bit off in certain light, but overall a really good selfie experience. Low lights felt a little bit darker and just not as sharp, but still very good. It doesn't really add any blur or grain. It's just not super sharp, but that's okay. Once we go outside, it's still the pretty much same result as on the P9 Lite. Very sharp, good amount of details, and overall a good transition of exposure and all that. It still tends to slightly overexpose sometimes, but for especially a $200 phone, I couldn't be really any more happier with the results, because it manages to get everything right. The autofocus works quite fast and reliable. Shutter speeds are definitely decent enough for this price as well. And once we switch to the video, it's still the same as on the P9 Lite. I'm still not impressed. I'm still a little bit disappointed that we have no autofocus, even though we have in the Pro Tools an option for continuous autofocus, but it just doesn't do anything. Also, the video isn't really sharp. Everything blends in together. We don't really have too much details. It is still a good, solid, I would say mid-range quality, but just don't expect too much. This would have been my opinion of the camera. So quite good, especially for the price. For pics, for videos, okay, I would say. And this leads me to my conclusion. Is it the best $200 phone? I would say if the performance with an update can be fixed and get on the level of the P9 Lite, I don't see any issues recommending this as the best sub $200 phone. And my only two gripes are the slightly weaker speaker. That isn't really a problem because it's still more than good enough. And the slightly weaker performance. If they fix that, everything would be fine. And then I don't really see too much of a reason to switch to the P9 Lite unless you want heavier multitasking, because then the 2 GB will be a little bit more limiting. And that would have been it, because the design, the in-hand feel is absolutely amazing. It feels very solid. It creaks a little bit, but that's really minor and nothing to disturb, because when will you twist your phone like I did in my testing? The display is on the same level, sound is still good as I said, battery life is on par, if not slightly better, the software is pretty much the same, and the camera is the same. So in the end, the only 2 or maybe 3 differences is the weaker speaker, that is no problem. The performance, it is after all a little bit more laggy, that could be fixed, and the biggest difference maybe will be the RAM management. But if you are in a country where you only have the P9 Lite available in the 2 GB version, then the actual difference is weaker or smaller, because then it doesn't make sense maybe to get. It always depends on the price. I would say the closer you get to a difference of just 50 euros or something like that, get the P9 Lite. But the more you get to a difference to 100 or so, which would be the official difference, the P9 Lite is a very great offering as well, because it is a very solid phone. And when I say the performance is laggy, it's not bad. It's still a great performance. It's just noticeably a little bit more laggy compared to the P9 Lite, which doesn't really mean it's not great still. For this price especially, because for a $200 phone, and in many countries it actually is even cheaper, and you get the fingerprint reader. This is something that they missed out. So if a fingerprint reader is important for you, then you should go for the P9 Lite. In Germany, that's not the case. Okay, I think I've covered everything, the differences and all that. It could have been a little bit longer. No, it actually stayed still quite okay. So if you have any questions, if I missed something, leave that down in the comments. And if you have to tell me anything else then as well. I hope you liked the video. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.